Running a call center is tough. Leading a sales team is a challenge. Luckily, your hosts know what it takes to succeed. What you can expect from your two guides? Conversations that won't be overly scripted, definitely not salesy or boring, just filled with as much value as possible. Each week, Jason and Oliver will bring you topics to help scale your team.
So Oliver is dealing with that. He'll be back in just a moment. I was chatting with him and he'll be joining, but I will take care of setting up what we're going to do today and laying the foundation, the groundwork. Today is September 8th, 2021. This is episode 18. We are going to talk about systems, processes, and documentation, which is the very unsexy side of running a sales team, running a call center, especially in building call center confidence. The having things systematized is usually not the fun part. It's not what people want to do, but usually they know that's important. So general housekeeping stuff. If you're tuning in, if you're watching this live, whether it is on LinkedIn, it's on Facebook, or on YouTube, please put in the comments, put in the chat, say hello, tell us where you're coming from. I know we have a bunch of regular watchers, listeners who tune in every week. And then I know that we have some other people out there who, if you're just joining us for the first time, say hi, leave a message. And then as we go through this, put your comments in there, your questions, anything that you have to do that deals with sales, questions, processes. Obviously, we'll deal with that. Oliver, welcome. I'm just doing some basic housekeeping, setting them up. I said that, you would be joining us momentarily, and here you are. Welcome, Mr. Catt.
I'm here. Hopefully my computer's holding out. I have no idea what is going on, but it sounds like there's an airplane inside it for some reason. So that's always a good thing. Yeah. No, I'm here. I'm good. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I am doing great. Was just letting people know if they're tuning in. Also, if people are tuning in through our website, which they can see the stream, callcenterconfidence.com. Hello, welcome. That's also on the YouTube. And I see Rich Edge. Good evening. He's one of your friends across the pond. And so it's nice to see you, as always, Rich, in your evening time, joining us after the workday. Also, I wanted to announce, most people, I've mentioned this before, but just in case you're new to the show, listening in, that the podcast is up and running. Episode 13 is the most recent one that came out. So we're on 18. We've been working on 2 episodes a week to get caught up so that the stream is full. And then the goal is at some point, we will record these. We'll record these on Wednesdays. And hopefully by the end of the week or the following Monday, the episode will be there. So if you're a fan of podcasts, which I am, I love watching live shows, podcasts, usually on 2 times speed while I'm walking or driving. It's a good way to absorb some content. So if you're a podcast listener, it's everywhere that podcasts are sold. And I think that's the main thing. Anything else?
No, I think you got pretty much all covered. Everything's up and running. I've been offline for a week, so I've been very laxed in trying to get everything up and running. Long story short, everybody, I joined the COVID boat that everybody is in. But no, I'm good, back in fit and fighting shape and ready to rock and roll. But we got a good show today, right, Jason?
Well, I think we do. I'm excited for it. As I was saying right before you joined, it's not the sexy part of running call centers and creating call center confidence. And it's not the topic that a lot of people who are leading sales teams and call centers like to talk about or think about, because generally people who are in sales, they got promoted, like we've talked about. Now they're running sales teams, and they're usually just good at that because they know sales. Scaling it and then taking it to another level, evening out the attrition, evening out the productions without the highs and lows, so it's just steady and improving. It takes systems, processes, and documentation, which is sometimes a dirty word. I think sales leaders would probably deal with performance improvement plans before documenting their systems and processes.
But that's the thing. Do you know what? It is about documenting everything. It is about making sure that, there we go, got a lovely dog in the background there. The joys of working from home. Look, at the end of the day, there are so many businesses, there are so many places out there that still haven't done the documentation part of the process, of the system, of the background, or anything like that. And I think a lot can be done, a lot can be delivered when it comes to something like that, because so many people want to get ahead of the curve. They want to go to that next point, but they don't even know where to go. So I think today we're going to give you some good tips. We're going to give you some pointers of where to go. And we'll start wherever we can. And if you've got any questions about how you do it, where you start your framework, drop it in the comment section. Let us know, because I think that's going to be key for everybody. And as we know, everybody's in a different situation when it comes to this type of thing. Everyone has PDPs, PIPs, whatever, but we need to make sure we put things down. RACI models, for example, for those of you out there that work in call centers, RACI models is a big part of that, as well as other things. Wouldn't you say?
I would. So when you think about, let's just say systems, let's take this one dirty word at a time for building this thing. one word at a time here. When you hear the word systems, what do you think that applies to within a call center?
Okay, so I'm going to touch a two-pronged approach with this, Jason. I'm going to come back to you because I've got a secondary question I need to ask you on this one. When you say systems, I have worked in the US side of the world. I've worked in the UK side of the world with call centers. And people use the word systems for two different things. So some companies use systems for the products they have, like CRM systems, LMS systems, all of that. And some people use systems as processes or process flows or things like that. What do you mean when you say systems?
Yes. So I love the fact that you asked that. That is, without even setting it up, that's exactly what I wanted to start with, was the use of these words, because a lot of times it is that debate, right? It is that when I say, hey, when I ask somebody, like, tell me about the systems you have in place for sales. Oh, we have a CRM, we have a dialer. We have a way to scrub our phone numbers against the do not call list. Okay. So yes, I love the fact that you asked that, and the answer is yes. So to me, there's systems and processes. When I use the word system, I'm thinking of, there's the sales tech, there's that stack, there's those systems, which might be actual systems that somebody bought or built. And then there's the system in the sales process. And what are the systems for doing this? Which, again, system or process you could interchange for that part, which is, okay, how does somebody know what to do? How do they move something from here to here? What's involved? When this happens, then what happens?
Okay, so look, that's a very good kind of point you raised. Thank you. And I think, look, it's clear to know the reason why I asked that question, and I think the reason why you were going in that direction is the first time I was ever asked that as a consultant. It threw me. I went into work for a client, and in my head, systems is technology. Systems is everything, the backbone, right, of what you're doing, and the processes are how you do X, Y, and Z in the system, the flow, the workflow, the call flow, whatever it might be. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because when I got really confused, and I didn't get angry with a client. I got frustrated over email, and it wasn't a negative thing, because they were like, right, okay, look, you really need to work on the systems first. And I was like, but I've, at your request, I've put the systems in place. They're up and running. I'm now creating the process mapping and manual for the system into that. No, but we need to see the systems first. I'm like, the systems are working. I even took you on a demo on that yesterday. No, that was the technology, the system. And it got out of hand very quickly. We had a phone call. We put it to bed very quickly, and we solved that situation. And I think that is something that people need. And when it comes to like jargon busting, guys, look, it's not the same jargon globally. It's not the same wording globally. If you're working with people internationally, make sure you're very clear about what element you're talking about. The same could be said as nesting, grad bay, academies. Everybody calls it something different. So for me, when I talk about the systems, I like to talk about technology. And for me, I then talk about technology documentation, process mapping, the flow of the call and the use of the system. That's the way I would see that. Would you see that any differently, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right about the terms, the words. I know in each industry, and then within that, each client that I've worked with in each company, they also just have their own terms for what they call various things, the processes, how they label it, like you said, nesting versus this versus that, what is onboarding versus not onboarding. And so, yes, I think for this discussion, we can talk about systems being the technology stack and the things that would go into it. So the systems that are running in the organization. Yep. And I think one of the biggest keys with that is to ensure that the systems are being used and that they're being maximized as much as possible, especially before looking at new or different or adding on other things. I know a lot of times companies want to get the latest and greatest, or somebody talks them into it. Some really good salesperson selling technology says, oh, you need to have this. And then they buy it and they weren't even using their other CRM. Now they have a new CRM. It wasn't the CRM that was the problem. It was the use or the management or the running of the CRM or the company culture. And so, not that the new CRM is the problem, but they weren't using what they had, right? So it's like if you're not a very good cook and you don't like cooking, and then I give you all new pots and pans and utensils and things to cook with, it may or may not help you want to cook more or make you like cooking or even make you a better cook. And so are you using what you've got? And I think that's the key with the sales tech stack in those systems, is understanding how you're using them, how well you're using them, and then where it is that it should be improved. And I will tell you, we've talked about this a bunch, especially when we're talking about KPIs and reporting. A lot of organizations don't actually know how well they're using what they've got, and or they know how well they're not using it and they don't really want to admit it. They don't want to talk about it. They just hope that it just is going to work, or it just, people will just use the CRM when they know it's not.
Yeah. I mean, look, when it comes to making the use of technology the best way possible, you have to understand everything you've got. You need somebody embedded within that software, within that platform, within that system, to ensure you're maximizing its full potential before you look elsewhere, you shop elsewhere. Otherwise, as a company, you're wasting money, and nobody wants to waste money. I heard of a client recently that bought a system, didn't really understand it, don't like it, and now they're looking to replace it already, but they've signed a contract. I'm like, what the biggest waste of money that is. But then likewise, I've joined a company before and I've gone, I really don't like this learning management system. Now, not to say that I was affiliated or associated with any of the other LMS platforms I've used out there before, but the problem comes, look, I was a bull in a china shop. I hold my hands up and I was like, I really don't like this system. It doesn't do half the things you need it to do. I was told very abruptly, make it work and then come to me with a proposal to switch, which anybody worth their soul would do anyway. But the fact is, I hate to say it, sometimes, and I don't know if everybody knows this saying, but you can't polish a turd. It's one of those things where you look at the system, you go, all right, fair enough. I'll maximize it for what I can do, but there is only so much you can do, because unfortunately, when you purchase this system in the first instance, you didn't buy everything it comes with. And I was having a conversation with a client the other day that a lot of companies will jump straight into bed with a platform because it meets cost requirements. The biggest thing about cost requirements is upfront, it may look 10, 15, 20, 30 grand a year cheaper than the next best thing, but you could end up spending an arm and a leg on that platform post-launch because of all the extras you didn't think about at the time, which is why, in my opinion, when you're looking at systems and you're looking at platforms and software, RFPs, write a list down, make sure you're going through everything and you're sending it out to all the other different companies out there to make sure that, it does everything you need it to do. I was chatting to this client about an LMS platform the other day, and they said one of the biggest things we ran into very quickly was we didn't pay for additional storage. And all of our content is video content and visual content. And now we've got to pay through the nose to add storage space into our platform that we hadn't accounted for when we first purchased it. So again, hidden costs, looking at all of this information, making sure that you're where you need to be, and the tools do that. And the only way you're going to do that, and we talk about this from a systems perspective, is make sure you have 3, 4, 5 choices on the table, not through the fact that you need to go and present this or whatever it might be, but you need to go and say, right, do I need storage? Do I need documentation? Do I need this? Do I need... Love it when somebody phones you in the middle of nowhere. But you need to make sure that everything you need and what you think you may need 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line of this contract or whatever it is you're signing, you are covering all bases. And that is where your process maps comes in. That is where your documentation comes in. And more importantly, and a lot of companies I've worked for do this, and a lot of companies I've worked for don't do this, is get your users involved in that platform. Wow, somebody really wants to get hold of me. Use that information to get your senior stakeholders on the phone, on a call with the platform, and find out what they need. Because I guarantee if you don't involve them in this process, you're going to find gaps down the line. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges, just in general, we don't know what we don't know, right? Like your example of the LMS, when you're talking about somebody picking that and not understanding the video storage side of it, right? Where then all of a sudden, that becomes an issue, and then you realize it is that you just don't know. Sometimes you just don't know the questions to ask, what you need to know, and what it takes. And I think that's the biggest key is if you're in the process of adding new systems, if you're shopping for new things for your company, is obviously find somebody who's using it, not necessarily the salespeople who are talking to you, maybe a consultant like us, maybe an organization that has something similar like yours, and ask what they've learned, what they've seen, what they ran into. Especially like one of the things I found is when shopping for new software, new technology for a company, is to talk to other clients that they give, recommendations to, or find other companies that are using that piece of technology and ask them what they would do different, what they found, what they learned from that process. And I think that's a key with that as well. And so I think that's important, though. I mean, and that's the challenge, right? Is that we just don't know what we don't know. You've got to figure it out, or you're going to pay for it in other painful ways. And I think that's important. But you're right, too, because if you look at that LMS example and we say, okay, well, if you had everything, all the processes documented, you had everything in place, you knew what was going to be, then you would know, okay, we're going to put this much video in it. Here's what we're going to be adding every week. Here's what we're going to be doing with it. We got to make sure we have the storage, because here's what's going to happen. And, unfortunately, like I started the show with, these topics, this category of building a call center doesn't happen enough from what I've seen.
No, it really doesn't. And, there are things out there that, as you say, people don't know what they don't know. There are the unknown elements out there. There are things starting from scratch. The amount of call center Facebook groups that I found over the last 6 months, where everybody's asking each other questions. Now, for me, these are questions that would come run of the mill, because maybe my experience of working in call centers has been different to these people. And I think you need to learn. You need to be able to kind of jump onto podcasts like this, or get involved in live streams like this, go to webinars, be able to ask questions, because, there are, I don't know, I'm not saying we're the most trained experts in the world. I like to think we know a lot about what we're talking about. But, there's a lot of things out there that people can answer just by jumping into a live stream, or jumping into a forum, or a LinkedIn group. I mean, the amount of call center LinkedIn groups there are out there is ridiculous, with people sharing ideas about platforms. So there's a lot of different options available to people out there. And if you don't know what you don't know about a system, don't be afraid to ask. Reach out to people, even speak to the people that you're speaking to, as I think as Jason was mentioning a minute ago, and ask to speak to their clients. I actually spoke to a company in Las Vegas that was a similar provider to one of the clients I worked with before. And, we went through, hey, look, we're looking to do this system. This is the one they want to do. They've come to me about information. I don't know this LMS platform. Tell me about it. And we got their feedback. And that's, you only get the answers by asking the right questions, right?
Yep. And I think, and Rich put a question in there. Are we talking about SOPs? And the answer is yes. I think that is the key, right? Is that we are talking about standard operating procedures, the documentation, and all of the systems. I think one of the biggest challenge with that and building the SOP is, first, it feels very overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And second, usually as soon as you create it, it's now out of date. And it's then you have to do version control. So let's talk about this. So if I'm running a call center, I've gotten to where I'm at right now with as many agents as I have. I've been successful, but I know that I want to scale, and I know that I keep hitting the ceiling, right? And I know that the next step is scalable systems, having the technology, having the procedures, the SOP, the documentation. And it's just this giant thing. Like, it would take a full-time person a long time to work on it. Where would you start? Where would you start if you're working on the SOP, the documentation? Where would you begin? What would you be your suggestion?
The beginning? That's my sarcastic answer. No, look, not everybody knows where to start. I can't even begin to say sometimes I know where to start. The way I map things out is I just kind of let my brain wander with things. I make notes, and then I try and organize those notes into a structure or a timeline of importance, or a project plan. There's so many project plan tools out there that you can use for free. And I do that. I just sit there and I jot things down. I spend an hour thinking about nothing else but this, and go, where does that go? Where does that go? Okay, just create a list and then move it into a respective timeline. For me, I have outsourced it before, and I have given something like that to somebody who's in the industry, or is a freelancer, or is a contractor, to be able to do something like that. Because sometimes, look, there are freelancers out there that are experts. That's what they're paid to do. They're paid to kind of do this. All the people like, us on LinkedIn writing posts every day, the people on Upwork or Freelancer advertising their services, that sit at home working from home all day, specifically doing something that's in their niche or in their realm. And sometimes you do have to do that, because maybe you don't know what you're doing, and you have to kind of realize that. I've done that before. It's the hardest thing to realize that you don't know what you're doing. But sometimes that self-realization can make a real difference, and also can de-stress the situation, because you are passing it out and you can focus on other areas. In terms of that, like I say, for where I would go if I wasn't outsourcing, put it into a timeline, put it into a matrix, look at opportunities, look at strategies, look at growth, look at where everything starts, and go that way. Rich has just put a very decent comment in there talking about requirements gathering, looking about everything that you need or you're going to need along the line. That's always a great way to start, because again, you can start to visualize what's going on. But again, everybody does things differently. How would you do it? Would you do the same approach, or would you do something differently?
It's tough, because my brain always wants to go with documenting and creating the processes around where the bottlenecks might be, the challenges, or where the inefficiencies are, because I want to improve those first. But that's tough, because then you're chasing those things, and you also don't know what's before then, right? That's leading up to it. So then you have to start before then, which means you have to start before then. I like your sarcastic comment that you started with, because I was laughing because I agree with it, which is start from the beginning, right? So we have marketing or lead generation. What is that system? What is that process? How do I document that? How do we know what the rules are, the parameters, the best practices? And then just essentially follow that lead through the process, through the sales process, until they become a customer, right?
Well,
and what does that look like?
That's the thing. I mean, you're never going to know until you know whether it works or it doesn't work. And the only people that are going to tell you that are the people that are using the process and the system and the map in the first instance. I was hired by a company last year to their sales strategy was just basically hit, hope, phone, place an order, job done. That's what it was. I was brought in to add a little bit more structure in terms of they wanted to grow, they wanted to expand, they wanted to go to multi-country remits, but how could they do that from a centralized area, knowing about stock and orders and users and placements? And then as we went through, they wanted to go, oh, can we add this? Can we add that? And it was like, okay, well, by adding that, you break this. So I now need to go back and fix this. And it's not to say things can't be fixed. It maybe broke is or broken is the wrong type of word, but maybe it just kind of, the process kind of falls apart because you want to throw something else in there that the calculations that the system was doing is now not going to calculate because you want to add a discount code or a regional price or something like that. And I think that is where things kind of differentiate itself. To give you an idea, when I started that project, I did start with it. I put the system in place, we did the CRM, and then I just sat down with my whiteboard and I worked out the customer flow on a Visio and another project planner and just went, okay, so when that happens, then that breaks out there. And by drawing it out on a white, I'm a visual person. I can only kind of work things out like that by putting it down on paper. So when I do that, I can then start to create the processes in the system to create the end game. And then you give that to your frontline reps and say, hey, look, here's the process map. Here's your call flow. This is what you need to follow. When it breaks, make a note, email me, tell me about it. And that's the only way you're going to know about it, right?
Yeah, and I agree. I'm such a visual person too. I will start with the whiteboard, then I will go to Visio to make a flow chart, and I will make flow charts on top of flow charts and map all those things out. And I think the biggest key, which you just hit on at the end, which keeps a lot of people from creating the documentation for their processes, and then also makes their documentation for their processes less effective, is those exceptions that break it. Right? Because you're dealing with humans who are running a sales process, right? Your salespeople are humans going through, and they're talking to another human as a part of their job. And so you've got two humans together, and it's literally not possible to account for every scenario and pathway and thing that might happen. And so sales operations are full of exceptions. There's always something. There's always, well, what if they don't have this? Oh, okay, now what do we do? Right. And then, so how do you handle that? And I think one of the biggest keys is don't let that stop you from documenting your processes. Make your SOP the best that you can. And then, like you said, as you're going through it, document those exceptions, document the variations, the things that branch off, and then figure out how much do you need to document those in your processes now? How much does that matter later on? Like, what is the goal? And I think that's really the point, is when you're starting this whole task, this project of systems, processes, and documentation, is you need to make sure you're clear on why you're doing it. Why are you creating this documentation and documenting what you've got? What is the purpose? What is the reason why you're doing it? Is it just to do it, to have it because some guys on a show told you that you need to be doing it? And it's cool. Like, hey, I check out this weekly show and I heard these guys talk about it. And now that we've done PIPs and we fired everybody like they told us to do a few weeks ago, which we didn't do. So don't blame us for that. But now they're talking about this. So we've got to do these things. So and I see that where people say, okay, well, we know this is what we should do. Like, for the same reason that I see many organizations who know or were told that they should have a mission, vision, and core values. And so they do it, they check the box, they have it on the wall, and nobody cares and no one's adhering to it because it's not actually a part of the organization. It wasn't something that came from deep inside. It was just something that was an exercise that, maybe there was a motivational course or some kind of leadership exercise, and now it's done. So same thing with this, is be very clear on why you want to create this documentation. Now, I will tell you, and I want to hear some of your examples, is for me, one of the biggest things is the constant awareness that most organizations are successful to where they're at now because of the people in the organization and what they know, and the fact that they know how to do the job. And if they were to disappear tomorrow or next week for any reason, right? They get sick, family emergency, need to move, who knows? Just get tired of it and walk out and don't ever come back. Without that person in that role, then the organization has this huge vacuum of knowledge and information. All that institutional knowledge is now gone. And any organization that's had that happen to them knows what that feels like. And all leaders in organizations should be kept up at night worrying about that. Like we talked about in the training, because I always talk about this, like, what if your trainer doesn't show up on Monday with a new class? How are you going to teach the class? It's the same thing. You got to get that information out of the trainer's head into an LMS, into a documented process. Same thing with all of your sales operation. If your manager leaves and the manager is the one that's in charge of the lead flow, how are you going to know how to hand out the leads? Who's going to be in charge when that happens? And I think it's so important to come at it from that perspective, which is we just want to make sure that everything we do is there, so that if somebody leaves, or this is the better scenario that I always focus on, which is I want to promote that person into a new role. How do I easily help that person who's going to fill in with that speed to competency, which you mention all the time?
Look, I mean, you've just hit like every nail on the head of every leadership, every call center owner, every manager of worries, woes, and things that are going to freak them the hell out. And if any of you take anything away from what Jason just said, whether you're listening today on the podcast live, whatever it might be, that there is the reason why every company should document everything, every process map, every system report, every automation, everything that your teams do that you're leaving with one person, get it on paper and put it down. I mean, I could go on for a long time telling you about scenarios where this happens, scenarios where that happens. Somebody's been, laterally moved, and they've got so much invested in a team that they're not going to be able to manage that anymore, or who's going to look after it or whatever. I mean, that's where handover documents come in, right? I mean, one of the biggest things that I always do whenever I leave a client or I'm handing something over, or I go in there to do something with a team and make things work or fix things. The idea when I step away is to make sure that whatever I've done with the team is continued after I leave. And I think any freelance trainer, consultant, whatever it is fully worth every penny if they do that and they do it successfully. So that in an ideal world, you don't ever, I'm talking myself out of a job here, but you don't even ever need to call on them again, because what they've done is so good that they can walk away and the teams continue to do it. I have a client that likes me to go back and revisit work just to keep it fresh. Now, that's a great thing to keep it fresh, because, certain training or whatever should be done every, quarter, every 6 months, whatever it is. But in an ideal world, you want to go in, you want to fix something, you want to walk away, and you want to know that it's fixed forever. I like to do an Excel spreadsheet handover, which is kind of like line item of action, who's responsible, who you need to keep informed, why this happens, why that happens, and how things work. Because that way, if you ever leave or somebody steps into your role, they can pick up this document and they can lift off where you've gone. There's no finding your feet. And that's the thing. It's like when somebody new joins a business, how long do you give them to find their feet? Because maybe their predecessor hasn't left a handover, hasn't left anything. I remember before I moved out to kind of the Caribbean side of the world, when I left my last company in London, I knowingly left my predecessor an entire handover document. I had something like 30, 40, 50 line items of things that they must do on this day. There was 20 line items that they must do weekly, 10 items that they must do monthly. And that was the only way that I knew that when I left something viable for them to pick up and deal with, and that I wasn't going to let them fail. I'm a biggest advocate of the same way that companies shouldn't promote somebody unless that person who's getting the promotion has created a succession plan where somebody can jump in and fill their boots. And the only way you do that is by leaving handover documents, documenting processes, documenting structures and the way things happen. But to your point, Jason, what happens when somebody's had enough? What happens when somebody doesn't come back? I unfortunately, jumping back 10 years now, the first time that ever happened to me, I got thrust into promotion because something happened to my direct report, who I kind of reported into. And I was kind of thrust into the spotlight to make sure that the project we were working on was delivered from a training perspective. I had no clue what I was doing. I was given a promotion. I was asked to make sure that this project succeeded. I didn't know what needed to be done. 5 minutes ago, I was training it out, not managing the training. And I wasn't given a handover. And there was things that I missed. But one of the things that I will say is, you, in that situation, you've got to hold your hands up and say, hey, look, yeah, right, I missed it, but I didn't know. But that then begs the question, which is getting the feet under the table. How long do you let somebody say, I didn't know about it, I wasn't aware of it, before it becomes, actually, do you know what? You should have known about this by now. People then use that to their advantage and they use it as an excuse. Oh, I didn't know. You can get away with that for the first 3 months. Can you get away with it a year after? What do you think?
Hopefully they're not trying to. If they're trying to, then that tells me they got maybe the wrong people on board. If they're still trying to use that excuse instead of actually doing the work.
I've seen it happen up to 16 months after transition that they're still going, well, I didn't know about that.
Well, and if there's documentation in place and they're using that, then that's one thing. If there's no documentation in place and they're not taking the initiative to learn things, that's a slightly different conversation. But either way, like, where is the responsibility? How do you ensure as a company it's scalable? And here's one of the biggest things. And this is where I'm super big on systems, processes, documentation for especially call centers, is looking what other industries do, right? And this is not always the most preferred example, but I think it strikes home with most people, is to look at McDonald's, right? Most people in the world are familiar with McDonald's. They're familiar with fast food. Ooh. McDonald's is very effective at serving billions of hamburgers a day with people who are entering the workforce, re-entering the workforce. It's in the past, like when I was a kid, it was like the minimum wage starter job. If you're in high school, they've been raising the wages, but it's one of those things where fast food in general, McDonald's, it's not a great product. It's not a very good burger by most standards, but you know what you're going to get. You're going to get the same burger in Iowa that you would in New York, that you do in California. I've eaten at McDonald's in several countries around the world. They have their own little variations. It's basically the same. The fries are the same. You know what you're going to get. It's consistent. And the reason why is because they have systems and processes. They literally have the French fry scoop that's the right size to make sure the right amount of French fries, right? Like the timers are there. Everything is there to make it so that somebody who isn't an expert at making burgers can walk into McDonald's with some training, follow the steps in the guide, and it's consistent. Again, it's not great, but it's consistent. The key is, what can you take from that and learn from that to apply to your call center? I call it McDonaldizing your sales team, which isn't necessarily meaning, okay, we want to have people who don't know what they're doing and I want to build this around them. No, but what can you document? What can you put in place? What can you have as far as systems and processes that allow you to take somebody who's a good fit for your company, good cultural fit, with the right attitude, with the right traits that you're looking for, and put everything around them in such a way that they can get that speed to competency. They can be successful as quickly as possible at doing the one thing you need them to do, which I mentioned earlier, which is be a human talking to another human. That's what you need them to do. Yep. And everything outside of the human to human interaction, until robots take over the world and we can have AI sell to the customer's AI and we don't even need people anymore. Then until then, we need people. That's why we run call centers. It's why we have sales. It's why we have customer service. It's why chatbots isn't the only option. People still want to talk to people. Like, there's a stat out there, 92% of people still do their interactions with companies over the phone, whether it's sales or service. They still want that. So it means you need the humans. What we're talking about with the systems, the processes, and the documentation is everything around that person such that it's supporting them and then it's consistent. Again, McDonald's isn't great. I know this example triggers some people, but it's consistent. Wherever you go, you know where you're going to get.
Yep.
And from your sales perspective, that's what you want. You put in a new person into your team. You know what you're going to get over time. Your customers want that. Your customers have a very low tolerance for crappy service and sales, and they want consistent high level of a sales professional or somebody that's helping them. And so you've got to document everything around them.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, just quickly touching on Rich's comment that he's made, he creates operational design documents with Excel to create a flow with graphical processes, separate tabs with version numbers, things like telephony design, IVR, complaints process, system access, operational process, and it's a living document for reference, or which is referenced by all the team. And that's great because at that point, everybody's involved. And as you say, with that McDonald's training, everybody knows what you're going to get. Their training is like their hamburger. It's the same everywhere you go, right? In every franchise, it's the same. I think one of the greatest tools that I ever did with one of the LMS platforms I used a few years ago, which they all do now, was the reallocation and the promotion that happened, obviously, to teams. They got promoted from sales agent to sales leader and things like that. And what you were able to do in the platform was create the hierarchy structure, and you could assign course content based on the hierarchy and where you were. Or if you got promoted from a frontline team to a leader, and then a leader to a supervisor to an operations director, or whatever it might be. And what we were able to do is we were able to load either course content that we'd bought, course content that we designed, or video content that we'd filmed, and you assign it to those levels. Now, as you know, one of my biggest passions is you get promoted and no one gives, pardon my words, nobody cares. Oh, I forget my life sometimes. And those people that get forgot about and just kind of end up in the cog, what this enabled was that leaders would get course content allocated to them the minute they got promoted. We automated this entire process to take it off of the trainers, off of IT, off of managers. As the training team, we were able to create the initial arc and the hierarchy structure and everything else, created the content, loaded it in, but then we aligned the platform with single sign-on and Active Directory within the company, so that when you received that promotion title to supervisor, manager, or whatever, and it was put into the directory at IT level, 24 hours later, when that did a complete sync with all of our systems across the business, the LMS also got updated. So the LMS went, Jason's been promoted from leader to supervisor. And then based on the schedule that we created for the content, you would automatically get these content pinged to you via email, via message, via in-app notification to say, hey, Jason, new course assigned. Welcome to being a leader, blah, 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 blah. This is the things that you need to be aware of. And it was all content that saved time on the trainers, expense, everything, because you know what? Everybody got it. Everybody got something. Now, don't get me wrong. It was generic content based on the level, but they were getting tools that they hadn't necessarily had before. And then when the specific training came up, they got pulled out, they got taken into classroom, et cetera, et cetera. But again, what did we do? We had the system in place. We documented the process. We built it into a digital system, and we put it out there, and it runs automatically. Now, again, you haven't got to worry about when somebody falls down, when somebody breaks or whatever, because the system does it for you. If the system breaks, we already have the report map of everything that goes in, and the content gets assigned to where with mapped out completion. So if anybody ever wants to add any other content, all they need to do is look at the document and go, okay, so I dropped that course in there, I dropped that course in there, and bang, that's assigned. That was how we did it. That's the way it worked. And again, the process maps were in place. So I think knowing that still works.
And I think the biggest thing, and this is the one huge takeaway, which you said a few times, which is it happens automatically. It was set up. There was triggers. It didn't involve a lot of human input or any input. Once it was built, obviously just to maintain it and manage it. It's like somebody managing the factory, but not having, to make each of the things in the factory. And I think that's the key for call center leaders watching or listening to this. You want to automate as many things as you can. And again, a lot of the hesitation is, well, you're going to automate this and it's going to take away my jobs, right? Oh, if you automate this, the trainer's thinking, oh, then what am I going to do all day? Well, you still need to train the people. There's so much to do. I promise, if you take what you just talked about and automating this one part of allocating training to newly promoted or moved in people, you take that away from what the trainer should be doing manually that I promise they're not actually doing because they're busy or they forget, right? And you take that thing away from them that they're probably not doing, and it frees up their time. I promise you that organizations are not maximizing the amount of ongoing training they could be doing with that trainer. There is more they could be doing. There's stuff that they're doing that's not in the highest and best use of that trainer or that manager or that QA person or that coach or whoever it is. They're doing things that could be automated and systematized and turned into processes and documented and handed off such that they can do more of what they could be and should be doing for your team, for your organization. And I think that's the biggest key. I see so many times sales leaders like, well, I don't want to automate that because then what am I going to do all day? Oh, don't worry. We'll find more stuff for you to do. I promise there's high value. Again, we want people to be working with the other people in the organization to help them improve and get better and scale and grow and level out the ups and downs and just consistent. And so the focus is on that instead of the scarcity of, I just don't want to lose my job because we bring in this QA software that does it automatically. What's QA going to do? Well, I promise there's things they can do.
Do you know, and that's the thing, you look at QA software, prime example, and I love that you brought that up because you and I both know a lot of companies that provide QA software. And I was having a conversation with one of them the other day. And, I think the average of number of calls marked, depending on the client, depending on the company, depending on the call volume, is between 0.01% and 1% of calls. That's the average of calls recorded by a QA team in a business. And don't get me wrong, that's because you're maximizing your QA team. You give them a bit of software, all of a sudden, 100% of calls are marked. 100%. Now that's not to say all of a sudden, I don't need my queue anymore because that they're gone, they're out the window, they're gone, they disappear. I don't need them. No. Now you use your QA team to go through that 100% of calls that maybe you missed previously, the 99%, and now you pick out the trends, you pick out the coaching topics, you pick out the gap analysis, you pick out the things that you didn't know your teams were doing, and you get QA to fix that, send it to the trainers to go and deliver it. Now the trainers that have automated their new training platform that's sending out leadership content, instead of spending, 20 hours doing administration of assigning courses and 20 hours worth of delivery, and now doing 35 hours worth of delivery because you've allowed QA to filter information down to the trainers, and they're only doing 5 hours worth of admin, which is your reporting and things like that. And then that reporting goes back to QA of all the training that you've done, they cross it off, and then they come back at you with another set of trends. It's a cycle that you can improve dramatically just by implementing a couple of systems and spending a few dollars here and a few dollars there. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not dismissing that software is cheap. It's not. But the productivity that you will see across your teams is exponential. You may see sales conversion results go up because of the additional training you're delivering. You may see attendance, or should I say, like attendance issues drop which is a good thing because you want to see those numbers go down, because all of a sudden managers are managing their team effectively because they've received the training, and it evolves by doing more, and it allows you to do more. And by no means are you making anyone obsolete. You're not saying goodbye to people. You're not putting robots in place. You're allowing people to deliver more content where it matters, rather than wasting times on administrative tasks that you are paying a high salary for somebody to do. If you don't want somebody like a high paid trainer or a high paid QA rep to do administration tasks, hire an admin assistant who can do it for you. But I guarantee they then don't have the skills to do the training work that the trainers need to do. So again, vicious cycle. That's my 2 cents anyway. You can see I'm passionate about it.
No, and I think we both are, right? Because that's the difference between what we've seen with successful call centers, and successful not being a dollar amount, but really a system process consistency. They know from a successful scalable point, if they put in $1 of marketing and $1 worth of staff, they're going to get X dollars out in return, right?
Yeah.
I see a lot of sales teams like, we're going to do some marketing. We have some people. Today we may make $3. Tomorrow we make 50 cents. We have no idea. And we have no idea why. It must be the market or the weather, or it's a full moon, or it's the president, or it's taxes, or who knows, right? Instead of having a consistent, scalable, successful operation, which is what we're talking about and helping you build. And I think the biggest thing is, as we wrap up, to take away for people that are watching or listening to this, it's overwhelming. Both Oliver and I have been hired into organizations as consultants and spent a lot of time for those companies, like building all of this and starting the process, getting it to a certain point. Like you said, I appreciate the fact that you actually have clients like I do that bring you back to revisit, refresh, update, kind of add to it, tweak it again. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking, this is a lot, like this is so much, first step, which Oliver mentioned, just map out the flow. Map out the flow of where a lead is starting in something marketing, branding related, where they're flowing to and where they get to be on the customer success, customer service side, right? Once they become a customer, map out that flow. Then start mapping out the systems that are a part of each one of those milestones, right? So where does the CRM come in? Where is your phone system, your dialer, like the QA software, those kind of things? Where do those fit into that overarching flow? And then from there, then you can start taking what you've got and putting that into those steps. So I have a script for this. I have some training for that. I've got this. Fill in that, and then just start filling in the gaps. And you can either start from the beginning, right? Like we talked about, or you can jump to where the biggest issues are that you can tell from your reports and your KPIs, and where you know there's issues, and go, okay, we know there's an issue right here. They're not closing enough deals. I need to get something in place. Maybe I need this, this, or this. Our follow-up sucks. I'll just say it. Most companies' follow-up suck. Their reps call somebody once, never calls them again. Company is trusting that they're going to call them. So what kind of system, what kind of process, what kind of documentation can you put in place to plug that hole? And then from there, then you just keep expanding, and you just keep expanding, and you play the long game. You look at it as a long-term project that doesn't end, because as soon as it's built, this documentation, this SOP, you're going to have to update it. Something's going to change. Somebody's going to want a new CRM, and it's going to update everything. Anything to add to that kind of summary punch list plan?
Mic drop. Not one little bit. I think you summarized everything exactly the way it needs to be done. And look, guys, there is a lot to take away, as Jason just said. There's a lot to digest from today, let alone you going away and documenting all of this stuff. And if you do need to do it, get it done. Or do you know what? I'm going to give you an excuse. If you're a senior leader in your call center, delegate it. Give it to somebody else to do that. Look, that's not me passing the buck or anything like that, because nobody knows the job perfectly or as well as the person that is doing it. So if you want to have these records, do not be afraid to tell your managers that they need to document what they do on a weekly basis, monthly basis, 6-monthly basis, especially if there's reports, emails, chains, deliverables, KPIs, metrics, whatever it might be. I guarantee some of them will give you pushback and they'll say, why do you want me to document what I'm doing? Are you planning on getting rid of me? No, that's not what you're doing. You're doing it. And be honest with them. Say, look, tomorrow you could get hit by a bus. It's one of those things that you're protecting your business as well as them and as well as the teams underneath them. And that's the thing, you need somebody who might need to come in and replace a senior leader because the team underneath them don't know what they're doing. There you go. Richard just said, I asked the agents to complete and get them to trial it on the others, test it out, make sure that the map, the SOPs that map out that are delivered actually work. Get your managers to do the same thing. Get managers to test other managers. There's a lot of things. But look, we could go on about this topic as we always could for many, many, many hours. But I think it's a good place to wrap it up. Jason dropped the bombs there right at the end, and I think there's some key takeaways there. Go back, re-listen to it, take them away, write them down, revisit it, come back next week. Any questions, let us know. The same way, if you do have any questions, all you need to do is drop us an email at info@callcenterconfidence.com, and you can get in touch with both Jason and myself, and we'll be able to answer any questions or any scenarios that you may have, because we all know as well as each other that everybody's scenarios are different. We all may be in the same boat. Actually, no, I read an analogy today. We all may be in the same ocean, but everybody's in different boats. I quite like that one.
Love it.
I read that today. I can't remember what. I think that may have been a COVID-related thing that I saw. I don't know. Anyway, but I love that because that analogy goes true to everything else. We're all doing the same thing but operating differently because that's what our businesses need. That's what our businesses require. So please get in touch. Don't forget, podcast, check it out. We're catching up. We're almost there. I think Jason said episode 13 this morning. So we're only about 3 or 4 weeks away from catching up to speed, and we'll have that delivered. Obviously, we will be back next week with episode 19 with some more hot topics on call center confidence with Cutter and Catt. Jason, thank you very much. As always, it has been a pleasure. I always look forward to our sessions, and I always look forward to the value that you bring to this. And I think we're here helping you guys. So if there's any topics you want to see, anything you want to cover, any conversations you feel are necessary in your environment, please let us know, and we will add them to the ever-growing topic list. So Jason, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad you're feeling better. Welcome to getting the COVID club, if you will. I'm glad you made it through it. Thank you for being here. This was awesome. And everyone, we will catch you next week. That's it. Take care.